Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mind Massage. And if you're here for the first time, if you're watching the replay for the first time, then I'll just introduce you. Dr. Tom Acklin, who is my amazing co-host, and I do a show called Mind Massage every week, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. South African time. And we look at issues that cause us to undergo evolution. And one of these, our topic today is called the value of outrage. And this was inspired by Tom, who is a functional medicine doctor and a regenerative neurologist. And it's just a beautiful conversation. So Tom, would you like to share your first thoughts about that topic and what inspired it?
I always am amused that you think I'm the one that inspired the topic because we work so well in collaboration and the thing just appears. Yeah, and a lot of the underpinning ideology of mind massage is the inevitable evolution, right? It's not just to allow evolution. We really can't help it, right? And that all sort of as a preamble to say these are challenging times. These people a lot of folks are looking for an answer, looking for a path, and looking for some comfort. And the idea of mind massage came from the idea that metabolic competence is an ongoing process. So we've demonized words like inflammation. In a social context, we've demonized words like outrage. But just like ignoring the inflammatory response for too long puts the body in a chronic inflammatory state, and such is the beginning of, quote, disease, ignoring a sense of outrage for too long leads to a chronic lack of self-expression, maybe is a good way to say it, and thus revolution, right? And where a body politic has been outraged without voice, then all of a sudden there needs to be a shakeup. So we were talking this morning about what does it look like to have constructive outrage, constructive voice. And you can probably say this brilliantly because you were the spark for the whole thing. We were playing with the idea that a free radical in the body is simply the proper pointer, right? And when balanced with lots of antioxidants, which is essentially lots of friends, right? When you think about a community dynamic, all of our friends, our loved ones, our supporters, our trusted community, we can think of those as antioxidants. And in the ocean of support molecules, just like in the ocean of support people, then we not only feel comfortable and calm in being able to express our outrage and our sense of dis-ease, maybe, but there is a calming, there is a centering. And so would you describe for everybody your take on wisdom there? Because you described it as being effectively outraged, yeah?
And I only have this analogy because I was thinking about how you've taught functional medicine. So the body, the mind, the spirit, they all have the same responses. So if we look at the body and we look at a free radical is outraged. And this free radical is outraged for whatever reason. It's probably that you're not getting the right foods, that justice isn't being served. And that's a big one in our lives as a collective, that justice isn't being served. We feel that our rights are being taken away. So here's this very outraged free radical. And that is outrage without direction, without a way forward, just being plain outraged. That can be good as a form of self-expression, but it also doesn't have any direction. So we're not going anywhere. What is the purpose of this outrage except to cause destruction? And then you get the antioxidant, which is also outraged. But the antioxidant moves forward in a way to donate an electron to the free radical and neutralize it. So the same thing is happening in the same space to the antioxidant, but the antioxidant has this direction, this purpose, this way to move forward, which is what we can define as effective outrage, because we're doing something about it. We're finding a way forward. And then bringing it back to the collective. Well, how can we do that at this time in our world, this time where we feel maybe insecure, we feel our rights are being taken away, and we don't feel, I don't speak for everyone, but I certainly do not feel protected. I feel like I've got to stand up and be me. So how can we do this? How can we do this and yet be effectively outraged? Because that is constructive too.
I always have the most beautiful, almost Bible of notes after we talk and play in these metaphors. And I think we just wrote a book about molecular justice, right? So the resolution at a biochemical level is what we would call molecular justice. And this sense of being effective, just like the body, when throwing a tantrum, if it's ignored for too long, if that particular tissue is ignored and not served, that will scar off the area. And similarly, in a social context, where a voice is spoken and ignored for too long, it will be scarred, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not we evolve, whether or not there is a forward motion to our emotion at the moment, or whether there's resolution or ignorance, this too shall pass, right? 20 years from now, we all likely will not feel the level of confrontation or outrage, whatever people are listening, whatever you're experiencing right now is the proper emotion, right? A lot of what we talk about on these broadcasts is there is no wrong thing to think, and it's nobody else's right to tell you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't be sad, you shouldn't be outraged. Similarly, nobody else can tell us that we shouldn't be happy or free. Healthy, thriving body comes back to center. Healthy body, healthy emotion and mind and soul and heart come back to center. We were talking this morning about what does this look like 20 years from now? And so I'd like to lead everybody just in a 60-second mind walk back to a time that something really had you, something really had its claws around your heart, whether you were angry or going through a tough time with an addiction, whether you're going through a breakup, whether you're going through a social trauma. Think of a time that you were about as angry and lost as you can be, right? And that's a while ago. And here we are, we're all here. So just presence the idea for a second and recognize that you did make it, you did come through. A lot of when we step into a psychotherapeutic sort of dynamic, we want to disentangle all of the little pieces of what was going on. That's not necessarily to place any blame or to make anything change. It doesn't change anything. What it does is give a little bit of a voice to those emotions that probably should have been spoken, right? And were obviously not supported at the time. So whatever it was for you personally that had you at what you hopefully consider your bottom at some point, and everybody's got one. And it might be right now. This might be happening in people's lives right now, and they might consider themselves at a bottom. There's a space to voice that in a being supported future.
Yes, there is.
And to bring it back to your brilliant analogy as a yoga teacher, when we're talking about a cramp, when you step very quickly into a physical practice and you're not warmed up, that isolated muscle that's actually doing more work than it should all by itself, that cramps up, right? But in a warm-up situation, all of a sudden we've got thousands of muscle fibers cooperating, and a bit of an expectation, and also a bit of an expectation that that dynamic that we call muscular recruitment, that dynamic is a known quantity in the physical tissues. And in a warmed up tissue, the cramp is resolved. The thing that is the instigator of the cramp is still there. In other words, if you're about to do a pull-up, it's exactly the same motion, but all of a sudden you're doing that in community, and you've got an instant resolution. So how do we talk to people? How do we share with people that there is a space someday, very soon, if you're going through this, there's a space that you will realize you got through it. You were supported.
Yeah, that is a very it's a very powerful place to be, because that is the point of empowerment, where we see that there is a turning point. We can turn the outrage can be constructive. The outrage serves a purpose, and like you were saying, if we think back to a time when we're lost, when we've been alone, and I do not like remembering such times because I don't like the energy that goes with it. It's that those kinds of times for me have been resolved. And you were talking this morning about, could we find gratitude for that? And maybe that's what we all need to be asking ourselves. What if we can do that sooner rather than later? Right now, the things that we are outraged about, and let's not even pretend not to be. It doesn't matter what you think. There's a part of you that's outraged about something right now because it's just such a crazy time. So whatever that is, can we find gratitude for it? Which doesn't mean we abandon the outrage. Can we find gratitude? Just take a minute.
It's a beautiful entry point into the conversation about our quick fixes. We're all very trained at stepping into how do I make this stop dynamics. For an alcoholic, it's take a drink, let's make this go away. For somebody who's addicted to a substance, it's let's get out of here right now. Give me my security blanket. And even if folks who are listening don't think they have an addictive substance in their life, it's an opportunity to say, okay, so how do I make the thing stop? What's my getaway, right? Do I have a certain way of talking to somebody on the phone who might be pushing my buttons, and I have an exit strategy? Do I have a way of exiting a business conversation by taking a personal phone call, right? We've all got these dynamics that are trusted, true, they work, just like booze works for the alcoholic, right? It's a getaway, and there's nothing good or bad about any of it. We're all addicted to our habits. And I think we're being offered a beautiful time here to shift our perspective on the getaway and what we were just discussing about being with what people call negative emotions is a huge, huge gift to people, right? And if we're in a good place, we can be that for people, and we can realize they're struggling, they're maybe not saying the thing that they need to say in the easiest way, and we can be a space for them to say something. and not maybe jump in with the solution, because there isn't one. There is simply the freedom of expression, right? And in that space is the dissipation of the angst. In that space is the ocean of support molecules. And all of a sudden, that free radical, that vigilante is the word I'm looking for, the Lone Ranger, right? We all know what it feels like to ride uphill, and that Lone Ranger mentality we can give the gift of people to have that Lone Ranger mentality transformed.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I was just thinking as you spoke that when we discussed what this mind massage was going to be about, the value of outrage, and I was looking for a picture to post, and I had in my mind what idea there was. There was going to be some other animal with their mouth wide open, like a lion roaring, or some outrage. And then came this beautiful picture of this. I'm looking at it as I speak, which is why I'm looking down. These waves crashing on these rocks in a very stormy sea. Looking at that maybe that's the value of it. Maybe that's the gratitude for it. Maybe as we watch these waves crashing on the rocks, and we say, well, the waves have outrage, but there's a direction, there's a purpose. The waves create change. And when the sea is calm, we see that the rocks are being bouldered by the waves, that the rocks have been changed, an impression has been made. I think that with our outrage, when we feel that, instead of suppressing it, if we could just express it in a way that we could create change to the world around us, to our environment, and it can be constructive and it can be meaningful and it can leave a legacy, then we've succeeded in effective outrage.
I love that metaphor. Maybe that's our takeaway, is not to scar ourselves off. Give ourselves voice, give ourselves permission. Then the effect of rage or sadness or angst is effective.
Yes. So let's have a call to action for our viewers right now and say that whatever you find that you are outraged about now, instead of looking back at what you were outraged about, just look in your now and say, I am outraged about. And there's going to be something, there may be 10 things, and just feel that and say, how can I have constructive outrage that moves me forward, that perhaps moves my world forward, that causes change, lasting change? What am I outraged about? Could I write about it? Could I do a video about it? Could I, whatever it is you do to express yourself, to create new ideas, to make people feel they're not alone. What is it that you're going to do? And you don't have to do anything, but outrage is one of the greatest expressions of self-care, especially when it has direction and it has purpose. So that's our challenge to you this week. And with that, I'll hand over to Tom for last word.
Well, thank you. I'll share one personal sense of outrage. I suppose it's a great opportunity. I happen to be here on the East Coast of the United States, and a lot of folks up in arms at some very surprising turns of events over the past 48 hours, which are the exclamation point on 2 years. And there's not a corner of the globe that was not impacted in some way and outraged and saddened transformed by the events of 20 years ago. So here we are on the eve of 9/11, which really has come to mean a battle call, a battle cry for lots of different people in lots of different ways. Whatever it meant to you 20 years ago, if you were here, we have yet another opportunity to speak. It doesn't need to be spoken out loud, and it doesn't need to be shared with anybody even. But stepping back into a place of remembrance for whatever the emotion was in the time, and whatever the sense of personal insult was at the time, I think is hugely, hugely, hugely therapeutic, right? So that's just my personal space this morning. And I was, with some of the news here, I was shocked, I think, surprised at how uncomfortable I was and am. And that's an incredibly freeing thing to be able to say out loud, even if I don't have any words and I don't have any direction. I don't have any suggestions for anybody. I don't have any advice. I try to stay out of politics. And so I don't even, I'm not one of these guys these days who pounds the hammer and says such and such should happen, because I don't know. I think that's the space a lot of people are in. There is a very surprising dissolution, dissolve trust in some of the authorities, some of the institutions. So that might be an interesting exercise as well. Identify the pieces in your life that you had trust in, maybe just a year ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. And those things aren't here anymore, right? Some of those things have transformed or dissolved. And if it's a person, sometimes they pass on, either physically or emotionally. And I think it's healthy to watch ourselves keep going, because we will, and we are. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that you bring, Hasina, is give people courage at the soul level to access those places without words. And mandatory evolution is our gift.
Thank you, Tom. And your words are so powerful. They are. I'm not even going to respond to them. I just want them to be the exclamation mark or the ellipses to lead to more. ... Yep.
Everybody have a ... kind of day.
Good night from South Africa.
Good afternoon from Frederick, Maryland. Peace.